Coming to you from deep within the swamps of the southeastern United States, this is a paranormal podcast unlike one you've ever experienced before. This is the Westgate Paranormal Podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is Eric Desaad, and welcome to another episode of the Westgate Paranormal Podcast. Once again, I am joined by my wife, Amanda.
Hello.
And today is going to be on the topic of EVPs and ITC, and it is July 17th, 2018. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
So first off, for those who don't know and who are just kind of popping in to see what this podcast is all about, we're going to be talking about EVPs and ITC. So I'm going to try as best as I can to kind of define that a little bit. EVP, for anyone who's ever seen any of the ghost shows, may already know that it stands for electronic voice phenomena. And they play a pretty important part for us when we go on investigations on locations and places trying to communicate with spirits. Because really what it comes down to is an EVP is a voice of someone or something that is not physically present in the room while we're doing an investigation. And it is a very reliable form of proof when caught, of a good quality one anyway, wouldn't you say?
No, absolutely.
They range in a lot of different, I guess you could say, technical realms as far as how discernible they are. And when it gets to the point to where, like, on some of the shows you're seeing the people talk about, well, we got an EVP of this person saying this or saying that, and you're hearing their little extracted clip, and it kind of just sounds like noise or static, and they have to manipulate it a lot. And sometimes you still don't even hear something. It could be, rustling clothes or wind blowing across the microphone or any number of things.
Or even farts.
Or that.
It has happened.
We do get some strange noises. But I don't really try not to really rely on anything like that at all. And later on in this episode, I'm going to be showing you some instances of some really good EVPs that we've caught on different investigations and stuff, and let you be the judge also. I will annotate it in a way, telling you, what I'm hearing. But most of these EVPs that I'm going to be sharing later on in the program anyway are pretty self-explanatory. I don't really think, with the quality of them, that I really have to say this is what I'm hearing and, convince you to hear the same thing. But so that it's basically a disincarnate voice that is being caught on some sort of recording device when an investigation is taking place. If it is an intelligent response, like answering our question that we're asking or something like that, then we know it is some sort of intelligent haunt. If it is just a random word that's thrown out there or something, there are lots of different theories that maybe it's just we're kind of eavesdropping on another dimension, whether it be, some people believe that they're not even spirits. Some people, as we'll go into here in a few minutes, believe that they could be aliens. It could be any number of things. It could literally be beings just like us existing in a different dimension even, and we're just kind of hearing them because for some reason that connection's being made between different dimensions, and we're hearing into their dimension. Because oftentimes, even when we're doing audio recordings, sometimes they're asking us questions. And we don't know that until we go back and listen to them because we're not hearing them with our own ears. And that's the unique thing about EVPs, that we're really not normally hearing them with our own ears. We're actually using some sort of audio recording device to try to make contact, and we'll go back and we'll review that audio and see what's being said in response to us, if anything. So now, on the other part of that, as far as EVP is concerned, is another thing called ITC, which stands for Instrumental Transcommunication. And that is using some sort of device to aid us in contact, whether it be a program that has sound files that it mixes up and plays back in random orders based upon interaction with spirit force, or even like spirit boxes, which are scanning radios basically that will scan through a set of frequencies, much like a police scanner does, but it does it really fast and it doesn't stop on a particular station. So we'll be hearing things that are coming out of like a broadcast spectrum, whatever broadcast spectrum that may be. Normally with spirit boxes or ghost boxes, they're actual radio stations, but it's scanning so fast that you're literally just getting a blip from each of those stations. So when you're actually hearing something come through on a spirit box that are whole words or phrases or sentences, then you know they're actually taking that from multiple frequencies over a wide range, and making words out of it, making responses that are not the actual broadcast, because we can reliably, sometimes when we use them, we can reliably get the same voice answering our questions throughout the whole thing, even though it may be scanning through, a few hundred frequencies at a time to do that, which would not be a radio transmission per se. So, and then we move further on to programs and apps, and my personal favorite that I use almost all the time when I'm doing it, even more so than I even use spirit boxes, is a program called EchoVox, and you can find that on like the Play Store for Android devices and stuff. You can just search EchoVox. That's with a V like Victor, and it's put out by Big Beard Studios, and that's been extremely reliable. It was actually taken apart, so to speak, by a guy on YouTube who was trying to kind of show how it works and how it can't be something that is made to give you canned responses, because there are well over 13,000 different sound files in it, in 6 different audio banks with the EchoVox 3 system anyway. And some of those sound banks, one of them is not even in the English language, so it's basically fragments of sounds, sounds of letters, parts of words. They're chopped up, they're mixed up, they're played backwards. There's also random noise sounds that are thrown in there, and they come across a lot in some places that I go that are just sort of bizarre. And lately, on some of the forums on Facebook and stuff too, people have even been saying that there are other random noises that come through, like a dog barking and things, and we'll hear like laughs and growls and just odd things that really is not something that you kind of expect. So that sort of briefly kind of sums up what EVP is. That's an electronic voice phenomena, disincarnate voice being recorded that you're not hearing with your own ear. And then ITC, instrumental transcommunication, which is using a device such as a spirit box, scanning radios, an app that mimics that, all sorts of those things. Now, as we kind of go back and look further back where all this developed, that's when it gets really interesting, because you could say the first spirit boxes that we know of in modern time that were kind of put into the spotlight by some of the ghost hunting shows really have been around in some form or another for a very long time, going back to some of the earlier or earliest inventors involving electronics and such. And some of that could even be with ITC because they've even used actual just broadcast radios and manually scanned. And anybody can still do this to this day. I know people online that I talk to who still use that method. Instead of using a digital radio, they use just an old analog radio, and they'll just manually basically turn the dial so it doesn't stop at any one point, and they just go back and forth doing that, and you get the same sort of effect. It's just, based upon you controlling the dial instead of a digital circuit doing it. So you want to talk about some of the past people?
Sure. I actually had a lot of fun looking up all of this stuff, because it turns out it's like a little soap opera, especially when it started out. There were, I guess, what we would call in modern days, there was a little bit of trolling going on between two well-known scientists, and there's a lot of fun history about EVPs. So basically, between 1840 and 1920 was like the huge spiritual movement, and that's when people started really doing, we covered it last week with the faux seances and the tilting of tables and things like that. Well, there were two specific scientists or inventors, I should say, that were very interested in all of this, even though they didn't want the public to know how interested they actually were in it. One was Tesla, and the other one was Edison. And Edison and Tesla apparently had, like, a huge beef with each other. They basically talked shit to each other constantly through, like, reporters and news, and they didn't like each other at all. So basically, Tesla was one of the first known men to experiment with EVPs. And what we use today is just a really fancy version of what he invented back then.
Yeah. And you can even you can buy them pre-made, or you can even buy simple electronic circuits, and they refer to it as this Tesla Spirit Radio, which is a couple sort of spiral coils of copper acting kind of like the inductance coil receiver that goes into a capacitance unit that's encased basically in a mason jar.
Yeah. So, with Tesla being the first person to kind of create something, Edison tried to come in and steal Tesla's patents that he was working on. And it was actually noted, I'm assuming multiple times in his journals, that Edison was actually trying to use his patents to talk with spirits. And Edison also openly mocked Tesla about his experiments in public. So these two really had it out for each other. But Edison did not end up giving Tesla the middle finger in the end. Edison ended up dying before he ever got to do anything close to what Tesla was doing.
So he didn't make it to Bill Gates status in those days.
No, he did not. He tried, but he did not. And the two funny things about these two guys is they had two different reasons for creating the EVP apparatus that we know today. Edison was trying to do it to contact spirits because Edison had a near-death experience, where Tesla actually thought the EVPs were from aliens.
Yeah, and it was by pure accident with Tesla,
right,
too.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it kind of all came together with those two, and actually how we actually have any type of EVPs today as we know it are because of these two. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. Let's see, our next guy is Radove. He was a Latvian-born psychologist, and he believed in parapsychology and the afterlife. him and Hans Bender did a lot of investigations together, and they actually ended up publishing a book, which I think, Eric, you own or have owned at one point in time?
You can find digital copies of Radove's book that have been put out online recently. They've actually recently just been completely translated into English, and the book itself is kind of like an encyclopedic work. It's a very large, in-depth treatise on all the stuff that Radove started by working on. A lot of his circuits are in there, as well as his theories and things that he found while he was experimenting.
That book is called Breakthrough, an Amazing Experiment in Electronic Communications with the Dead. It's a really long title. I hope you had a pen, or you're able to play this back if you're interested in reading it. That's kind of it on him. I mean, he's kind of a big deal with him putting out and publishing that book. That was one of, I guess, kind of the first of its kind to really come out.
And in a sort of whole way, sort of speaking about it, Radove was actually somewhat recent too, because he died in the 70s. He died
in 73. His book was published in 71. He died in 73.
Right,
or 74. Excuse me.
You can actually still find just the Radove circuits online if you have electronic knowledge to do it yourself, or there are companies that actually make what they call the Radove microphone, I believe, and it's basically a diode-based receiver that you just plug in place of a microphone. So it doesn't necessarily record audio like a microphone would, but it uses a resistor capacitance sort of circuit that's encased in something. So you're actually able to, how to explain it without sounding too technical or weird, you can kind of pick up voices like a microphone would, but it's also picking up transmissions in the electromagnetic spectrum at the same time. So it's sort of like it works as its own crystal radio receiver, antenna, and microphone all at once, and you plug it in just like you would a microphone.
Interesting.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Experiment with it.
Well, I guess the next thing that we kind of go into, after all the inventors and things, because I mean it's only come so far, and we are going to get into the Xbox, not the Xbox, the Ghost Box, a little later. I'll let Eric kind of cover more of that, because I'm not super familiar with it. I mean, I've used it, but I don't know a whole lot about it. But talking about accidental EVPs and things, like people sitting around and you're recording, you go back and you listen to something and you hear something in the background. Back in September of 1952, two Catholic priests were recording a Gregorian chant, but one of the wires kept breaking when they were trying to record. And so, in frustration, one of the priests says out loud, and he asked for help from his father who had died. And as they went back and listened to the recorder, on the voice recorder it says, "Of course I shall help you. I'm always with you," end quote. The voice even called the priest by his childhood nickname that his dad called him, which was Zucchini. So, if you're looking for proof, I feel like that's about as personal as you can get with someone reaching out to you. After they had heard all of that, the two priests were horrified by hearing what they heard on the recording, and they actually took it to the Pope in Rome, where the Pope basically was like, "Don't be scared of this. You didn't do anything wrong." Because the priests went to them because they thought they were recording devils, and that you're not, as a priest, supposed to speak to the dead. So they were really bothered by it. So that's why they brought it, and the Pope was like, "Hey man, it's cool. We'll call it a scientific experiment. Y'all didn't do anything wrong."
Scientific experiment.
Yeah, so even the Pope back then was like, "No, it's cool. Like, this stuff happens." So I think that's pretty, it's pretty neat.
That is cool.
And pretty funny, because I can't imagine being two priests and you get this recording of a voice calling your friend over there zucchini, and you don't know where it comes from.
I'm not even going to question why he got
Yeah,
that nickname.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I did have the two priests' names available. I did not write them down, so I can only imagine.
Just Google zucchini priest dead voices.
I don't think that I would recommend.
And make sure you don't do it with the Google Images.
Yeah, I don't think putting in zucchini priest would probably get the results that you're actually looking for.
Probably not.
Most likely not. So, let's see. What else do I have here? I did a lot of investigating for you guys with this stuff because a lot of people don't know a whole lot about EVPs or where they come from or anything like that. So, and I didn't. I knew what they were, but I didn't know anything about the origin. So this was kind of fun looking this stuff up. Our next guy is Fredrik Jurgensen. He was a Swedish filmmaker, and he actually caught his first EVP while recording bird songs out in nature that he was going to do for his documentary.
Yep. That was a big one.
Yeah, I'd say so, because it's kind of like one of the Catholic priests. When he went to play back the bird songs, he heard his mother speaking to him in German, and she said, quote, "Frederick, you are being watched. Fredel, my little Fredel, can you hear me?" End quote.
Wow.
Yeah, and so years later, Jurgensen admitted that when he heard his mother's voice, he knew it was an important discovery.
Yeah.
And so after that point, he actually, what was it? It says, supposedly, he actually captured over 100,000 audio tapes of EVPs.
Crazy.
And all of them were supposedly recorded under lab conditions, too. Not just, like, out in the open or out, investigating a random place. Like, it was actually done under the strictest conditions.
So it was undeniable he wasn't just picking up wind and rustling and thinking he's hearing something out of that.
Right, absolutely. What else do I have for you? So we've talked a lot about guys, and so I figured I'd throw a female into the mix here. Let's see, we've got, her name is Sarah Estep, and she actually created the American Association of EVPs back in 1982. She created it to standardize and educate EVP collection and procedures and increase public's awareness of basically ghosts and spirits. She was big on it, and she wanted to kind of make it official. The American Association of EVPs is actually still active to this day. It publishes a quarterly newsletter that's designed to keep its members up to date on their newest discoveries found using EVP and ITC, and they also are big on collecting images too. So it's still an active association.
That's really cool. There's also another. It's not really quite as active within these last couple of years, but itcvoices.org, which is an online collaboration kind of. They even for a while there were listing a lot of the radios, just off-the-shelf radios that could be modified for scan sweep circuits that are kind of built in. So they basically have a running list. Like I said, it's a little outdated now, but a lot before we had these, like the spirit boxes that Gary Galka has with the PSB 7 and 11, a lot of people, myself included, would just go to Radio Shack and get, the specific types of digital radios that we knew that we could modify. And I still have one that they don't make anymore, and we referred to them as Shack Hacks. And Shack Hacks could, they could be Sonys, they could be Walkmans, Memorexes, any number of those. And you can still find people doing it, like Wagner ITC online. He buys them and then he modifies them and sells them on eBay, and he has his own YouTube channel showing the different radios and their sweep rates. And some groups now are even using like Arduino circuits and such and building their own based upon that. But really the biggest mass-produced one that's still readily available is and readily used is the SB7 by Gary Galka, who also makes the millimeter and the real-time EVP recording device and a lot of other different things too. But that's probably what you see the most use of on a lot of these ghost hunting shows and stuff. But that's sort of an aside with that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. It gives me a breather. My last point I'm super excited about, and then I actually will let Eric take over because it goes right into what he needs. Just because I'm a huge Michael Keaton fan. The movie White Noise. So White Noise is a thing. White Noise is not based on a true story. I will start that off by saying that. But it is an actual method of using white noise to help spirits be able to contact us and go back and forth. If you haven't seen the movie, which, I mean, it's not a new movie, it was 2005. And if you're interested in, learning a little bit more and having a little bit of fun watching something that uses, what we're talking about, White Noise is super fun, really good movie. I don't care what you say, change my mind. But anyway, that leads into what Eric is going to talk about now with what exactly a ghost box is and how does it use white noise to do what it does.
Right. So the theory is with white noise itself, and I kind of touched on this in the last podcast we did too, is that there's kind of a defining line. Some people can have static going, which static is white noise. It's a combination of a lot of different frequencies of sound playing simultaneously, and they can hear voices coming through the white noise. Now you got to kind of be careful in a way, because you can also have what's known as pareidolia, where you're basically hearing things that aren't there, just like you're seeing faces in the clouds and seeing constellations. Your mind looks for connections, but the theory is that white noise acts as a sort of a carrier wave, and spirits can manipulate the sound of the white noise to create the words. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be static. It could be a constant sound of running water or the sound of a fan, things like that, and the voices will be carried through it. So it's basically like it acts as a carrier wave, just like AM/FM broadcasts. They have a carrier wave, then they apply an electronic signal. It's turned into a sound, and that carrier wave is the frequency that you're tuning to, and it's received on a circuit somewhere else, your radio, basically. So white noise has always been kind of this catch-22 that if you get something that's undeniable as an EVP, using white noise, it's been very effective.
I love anytime one is used. Anytime, whether it's the Ghost Box or Echo Box or anything like that, I feel like the voices are a little bit more clear.
Yeah. With the Ghost Box or the Spirit Box, you're getting that white noise, but with things like the Echo Box and stuff, those are literally just sound fragments. And that was kind of the thing too with Gary Galka when he did the SB7. Here in America anyway, it actually scans a range of radio frequencies beyond what we use here in America for radio transmissions. So there are areas that you should not be getting anything but white noise. So when you do get those voices coming through in those frequencies, it's not a radio transmission, because we're not going to be able to pick up say here in Florida, a radio transmission that's originating in Japan on FM. It doesn't have that range like shortwave does. And in Japan, they do use those extra frequencies. That's just an example. But here in America, we don't. It stops at that certain cutoff point around 86 megahertz. And then this actually goes down below that. So it's been very effective. And it's kind of like I said, you just have to be careful because not be careful like something bad could happen, but just so you're not sitting there trancing out, listening to static and hearing things that no one else is hearing. And that's kind of my way of gauging it, I guess. Like, if I hear something, I'll say, what do you hear in this? Before I say, this is what I'm hearing. Because I don't want to influence that. If 2 or 3 people aren't hearing a voice to begin with, then there's probably not a voice. And then the more people that are actually hearing the same thing gives it more credence as being valid, makes it a higher class of EVP.
Right.
And you'll hear some of those here in a while when I edit these other EVPs in there and let y'all hear them. That you'll see that some of the EVPs that I really rely on are undeniable pretty much on what they say. Sometimes there's, a word that EVPs, the acoustics are not always the same as how we sound when we're talking to each other in a room. Sometimes they're going to be faster, like the person speaking faster. Sometimes it's going to have kind of an echo to it. It just doesn't sound exactly like us, but you can undeniably tell that it's a voice saying something.
And him and I have argued over what something says.
Right.
But him and I have also realized that we hear at different ranges too. And so I feel like that goes into it too, where sometimes I hear something at a different octave that you don't.
Exactly.
Or if it's, higher pitch, you hear it, where if it's lower pitch, I hear it.
Right. And it's the same thing too, even with like sounds that irritate me. Like low frequency sounds irritate you and high frequency sounds irritate me.
Right.
But that's what I'm hearing more of are the higher frequencies, and you're hearing more of the lower frequencies. So we're kind of separate in that, and that
it's actually a good thing in my opinion, because we hear a more full range, but then we have to bring in a third person to figure out who hears what.
Exactly. Yeah, because we're not all hearing the same thing, just like we're not all seeing exactly the same spectrums sometimes of colors. I mean, everybody's a little bit different, and especially if you've had any sort of like nerve damage in your ears or anything like that also affects it,
Which I have.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of factors that go into a lot of this. And that, I mean, it's a really valuable tool, in my opinion, using things that rely on EVP as an investigative tool. Honestly, I think you get a lot more evidence with EVP in my own personal experience than you do with a lot of other things. We can have REM pods set up that they can interact with. We can have cameras that are, either night vision or full spectrum. We can have the audio recorders. We can have a buttload of different things. But EVPs seem to be caught a lot more frequently than all of the other methods. And plus, it's something that we can relate to because they're words, they're phrases and stuff. Whereas if, we get an EMF reading that's unusual, it's anomalous, we don't always know exactly what it is. We just know something is out of the ordinary and it's triggering our EMF. It's when we get those multiple instances of we have a high EMF spike, we get a strange anomaly on film, video, and then the EVP ties it all together, because if we have a voice, then we're like, okay, this is undeniable.
Right.
I use that, though, undeniable. It's not always undeniable.
No,
because the theory is like, okay, we hear somebody's voice. Say like a frequent one is like a child's voice that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I know of one place that I go pretty much nightly when I take tours out there, that we have places where spirits actually mimic the voices of other people that are there. And we don't quite understand what that is, whether it is benevolent or whether it's malevolent, or whether it's just something that can kind of mimic something altogether, and it may not even be a spirit. It may be something completely unknown to us, and why it's doing that, I don't know.
Right. Can I just say really quick that, like, I am so stoked to, like, one day be a ghost if, like, all of this stuff is real, because I am going to mess with so many people, and they're going to be random, because I'm really random, and it's just, I'm just really excited about that. I've been talking about this for a while.
You can say whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about getting into a fight afterwards.
Maybe.
You'll probably scare them off.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, that's one of the main things that I rely on, honestly, is EVP nowadays. Over the years, I've leaned more and more and more into EVP as almost like one of my primary focuses and stuff that I do. And that's why it's so awesome, I think, that we have developers now that are working not just on the technological aspect, within the electronics world, but people like Danny making EchoVox.
Yay, Danny!
Yay, Danny! EchoVox, Big Beard Studios. If you don't, just Google it. Google EchoVox. Go on YouTube. There are tons of people who have put up videos using EchoVox, and in my opinion, it is by far the best system that I have ever used. That I could take a spirit box in someplace and maybe get nothing at all. And then with EchoVox, within usually just a few minutes, if it's an active place, it will be intelligent responses coming back and forth. Sometimes not what I want to hear.
Right. And sometimes you have gone out there to the specific place you're talking about, and you've come home with nothing. Like, you have used it before. So it's not one of those where, oh my God, I take it in here and every time I get... It's not that situation.
And nothing's guaranteed like that. It's just like if you know you're going into a spot, it's like, maybe going into a restaurant. One day it's going to be packed and one day it's going to be dead.
You're going to get good service, you're going to get bad service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, depending on what's there, especially if it's an area that is frequented by a lot of different entities, that has a portal, which is a whole other episode we plan on doing, is about portals. But if there's a portal of some sort there, that's sort of like an open door for all sorts of different things to come and go all the time. So you may get different responses from different beings from night to night, sometimes even from hour to hour. So it's not always, you can't always expect just to walk in and be like, okay, it's going to happen, because this is how it is on the shows. Even you're watching, say, a ghost hunting show for an hour, they may have been there for days just to get those handful of pieces of evidence.
Absolutely.
That they edit into that 1 hour. I know even me, like, when I was in Ripley's, we were there for 4 days and 4 nights set up, and it's just a handful of a bit of stuff. But then sometimes people go in there and it's like, boom, like as soon as they walk through the door, stuff's happening. So,
well, I think like Moon River Brewery is kind of like the perfect example of when you don't think anything's going on when it actually is, because I mean, most of that night, no activity. Like, it's big for things moving or footsteps, things like that. And pretty much the whole time we were there, we didn't hear anything or see anything. But when we got home, there was more on our recorders than any of us ever even realized.
Yeah, I mean, with that particular one, the biggest thing for me was that full-on apparition on the FLIR at the bottom of the stairs, first of all, and then the apparition in the basement that just surrounded me. And that's on my YouTube channel. It's on my Facebook thing with Westgate Paranormal if you want to see that. But yeah, I'll play the EVP clip for you later on, and it's a response to that. You'll hear our friend Ryan Dunn, who is the owner of the Savannah Ghost Research Society. He does afterlife tours in Savannah, Georgia. And you've probably seen him on some other shows like Paranormal Lockdown with the Chatham County Jail and some other things that he's currently working on. And you'll hear him talking basically asking if anyone's there, I think is what it is. And then afterwards, you'll hear the undeniable response. And I was pretty much directed at you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the crazy part, because we don't have kids.
No.
But in the EVP, it's a little girl saying "mama," like.
And the whole night, like, every once in a while I would have my hand held, or I would have like my hair pulled, but I don't hold a lot of weight to things like that, because I do feel as though when you are put in a dark room and you are alone, you're gonna feel things.
Yeah.
So with like little pulls of hair, hand holding, shirt moving, stuff like that, I don't call that evidence until I get like bit or scratched,
right.
or
a personal experience can be interpreted a lot of different ways, and it's a good gauge when there's something happening there, when people start feeling things, but everybody experiences it differently, and it's very
right.
anecdotal. They could say, two different people may have a completely different experience personally, even though the same thing's happening to them.
Right. And I know I am sensitive to those things, so it's not uncommon for me to be places and have my shirt pulled, my hair pulled, so I don't ever put that down as credible for others.
Exactly.
Like, it works for me, and I understand it, and I know what's going on, but I don't ever say it out loud to anybody, because I don't want people to be like, oh my God, I felt that. Oh, now I feel this. Like, if somebody else says it to me and it's happened to me already, I'll be like, yeah, I had a similar situation. So I'll have some other type of credible evidence to hold it to, Does
right.
that make sense?
Yeah, it's not entirely anecdotal.
Right.
You gotta kind of put them all together. Because in a place like there's some people react to such an extreme over something.
Right.
Sometimes just out of fear. Sometimes because it's affecting them on a completely different level too. Like, somebody could be touched and go running out of the place screaming, whereas
right.
another person's like, "Oh, you touched me, thank you." You
right.
know, it's
right.
like thank you for showing yourself. And so that's where that whole anecdotal experience. It's like it's got to all play together in some way within an investigative sort of approach. Anyway, I'm not saying that experiences are not real and life changing, but
oh, they absolutely are.
Yeah. But if it's an investigation, you
have to go out with your science brain.
Yeah, science brain. Science brain. Brain pan for science.
Yep.
So that kind of, I mean, it's a really wide field. We're kind of just barely touching on this with EVP, but it's a really wide field, and there's so many differing opinions on what they could be. I mean, personally, I see it as that if you go into an investigation, or even just say you're just sort of testing it out, you think something's happening in your house, so you set up an audio recorder. And by the way, anything that records audio will work to capture EVPs. It could be an app on your cell phone that's a voice recorder.
Absolutely.
It could be anything. Very first time I heard EVPs was on a reel-to-reel recorder as a kid, and I didn't even know what they were. And we've caught them on all kinds of stuff. I've still got micro cassette recorders with tapes that have EVPs on them. Granted, it's harder to get a good recording put over on your computer to listen to it or to edit it that way, because you've got a lot of machine noise in it. It's an older type of technology. It's not digital. So you've got to jump through a few more hoops to get it on your computer and make it readable. But they're all valid methods of doing it. But the point is that there are so many different opinions about what EVP is, that this is sort of my criteria when I'm looking for something that's an EVP. First off, is the most obvious. You have to be able to understand it, and other people have to be able to understand it. It can't just sound like garbled noise and then, open to interpretation 10 different ways by 10 different people. So that's the first one. The higher the class of EVP, the better evidence it is. And believe it or not, high class or class A EVPs are a lot more common than you think if you're going into an area, especially already has activity. But say you're doing it in your house, you have just a pocket digital recorder or an app to record something on your phone, and you catch something. Now, my criteria really is if you capture a voice that is not from someone in the room with you or even in the house with you or anything while you're recording it, first off, is it just a random voice? Is it just random words, like somebody's talking and you're hearing them talk? Or are they responding to you? If it is intelligent as an actual haunting and you're asking a question and you get a response to that question, then obviously you're communicating with it.
Right. And we have actually recorded in the house before. And I will say the first thing that you have to rule out are bodily noises that you are making in your home if you're recording at night, because my husband did not know he snored until the night that we recorded.
Definitely not like that.
So there is that. But the cool thing that we actually caught on the EVP that Eric hasn't touched on is we actually caught one of our cats talking to something in the house because we got voices responding to Milo meowing at it.
Right.
So that was cool too.
And a lot of the stuff that we were trying to kind of get when we were doing that, we basically set up an audio recorder and we hung it from sort of an archway in our house, so it wasn't touching anything. It was off the ground, off of tables. None of our animals
could hit it.
Right, nothing could come in contact with it. It was just hanging there, isolated. And we did it when we went to bed, which is obviously why I was like, "What is that noise?" And you're like, "Drew's snoring
every night, every single night."
And this was, mind you, on the other side of the house. So
yeah. Thank you. You see what I have to sleep with every night.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, as far as the theories go, if it's responding back to you, and this is just my opinion, just from being in different places doing this, is that is a haunt. That is an intelligent response.
Absolutely.
To me, it's a spirit, because especially if it's a voice you recognize. I don't have it to share, but it's just sort of a little story that I'll tell you about with it. That house I used to live in, our neighbor, she actually murdered her husband, and it was supposed to be, from what she told the police when they actually finally found her and arrested her, because she left. She went to a completely different city, and she didn't even say anything. And their kids were wondering why they couldn't get a hold of their parents, apparently. And days later, they went over there and found their dad dead in the house, and then tracked down the mom and arrested her. She said it was supposed to be a murder-suicide pact between her and her husband. And she was a nurse. He was a retired police officer. So she said she basically gave him an overdose of insulin and painkillers and then couldn't go through with it on her own. So she was convicted, went to prison for 8 years, is now back out. But not too long after it happened, I kept going over to the outside of the house because it was right next door to me and doing EVP sessions. And I unmistakably got his voice responding back to me a couple times on the recordings. So that's another thing to look out for, that, if you recognize the voice and it's responding back, then that gives more credence to the theory that it is actually a spirit voice and not maybe an alien's voice.
Right. And I've absolutely heard my grandparents in this house.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
So that kind of covers those different ideas too, because some people do think, well, no, we're not talking to spirits, we're talking to aliens. Or some people believe, depending on their sort of religious predisposition, that anything you communicate with is obviously not a dead person, but is completely evil and pretending to be a person. So there's a lot of ifs with that when you go into religious. Which I feel like there's
some of that I still feel like there is absolutely some of that in some of the places too. I feel like it intermingles.
In some of the places, yeah, because they, like I said, they can mimic. Some things can mimic.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and that's pretty common with the kids. If you get, it's sort of a cliche thing to say, but like, the spirit girl, there's always a little spirit girl somewhere, and oftentimes it's not good. So a lot of people, and me included, some of these places that, it could very well be that what we think is the spirit of a little girl could really be some malevolent or maybe even demonic force that's pretending to be something like a little girl because they're young, cute, innocent. You want to help them, and then next thing you know, it's bad. Why are you giving me a weird look like
Aren't
that?
all children demons,
Oh.
though? I mean, really?
Yeah, I can see your point.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying.
Yes, I do.
It's like lure you in with a teddy bear, and it's actually a Sasquatch waiting to bash your head.
Let us make that the a definite episode later. I want to know about this teddy bear Sasquatch
Chewbacca.
ninja that's out there killing people.
Chewbacca of the woods. So I'm not going to play these as I'm talking, so you may hear a little bit of edit as we go in, but we're both very familiar with the list of these EVPs that I'm going to talk about, and I have them ordered, so I'm going to actually sort of describe it, and then post-production I'm going to go in and edit it in so you can hear what it's saying. But what's the first one we got on the list? Is it the Anyone There?
Yeah, our first one is Anyone There.
So this EVP was actually taken in a place that I go to almost on a nightly basis. The only time I don't go there is when I'm not working. And it's rare that I get 2 days off in a row, so that's most nights of the week. This is actually from an antique shop in St. Augustine, and it's on 7 Aviles Street. It's the oldest street in the United States, in the oldest city in the United States, St. Augustine, Florida. And this particular building now is known as Antiques and Uniques Collectibles, but when it was built in 1888, which is much later than the city of St. Augustine was founded, because it was founded in 1565. But this particular building was built for the specific purpose of being a jail. It was the St. Augustine City Jail. For anyone who's familiar or who wants to look up St. Augustine history, it actually predates what we refer to as the old jail on the north side of town, which was the hanging jail. This one is a small building, and it had holding cells in the back. The building is always very active. Right now, it is owned by Denise and Larry Altman, and there's always some sort of investigation going on there. The owner, Denise, does overnights with guests. The tour company that I work for down there, we also do overnight investigations that we bring people in, and they pay to stay there overnight and investigate. So it's always active, but there's at least one portal that's constant there. And then there's another area that used to be the alleyway, which is now a hallway in the building, which is also quite active, that we believe is more of a man-made portal just from some of the things that have happened there in the past. So usually when I go in there, I'll set a recorder down. I'll tell people the history of the place. They go around to get their own evidence and their own impressions as well. Excuse me. So a few of these you're going to hear actually from there, just because it's such a busy, active area. This one, when I was walking around and we were trying to communicate with the spirits that's in there, asking questions, the EVP that we got back basically is asking, "Is anyone there?" And you can hear it. It's a girl's voice, and that's what she's saying. So this is the EVP. I know it plays, as you can tell, it plays a little bit different speed as what a lot of people maybe would talk, but it's very discernible what's being said. So what's the next one?
Our next one is business.
This one kind of goes into the random words category because I have no idea what it's even referring to. There's this man's voice on the recording one time, and it's very loud, very deep, and very clear, and he just says business. So what that refers to, I'm not really sure, but I'm kind of thinking it's probably maybe just somebody could have been saying something in the background and, referring to what the place was, and he's kind of like, this was my business,
Yeah.
What's the next one?
The next one is actually, they're some of my favorite EVPs. We're only going to play one. But it's the jingling of jail keys, and it's actually an EVP we get fairly often. I wouldn't say on a regular basis, but I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a month we get it, maybe a little bit more. It's undeniable, and the fact that it almost sounds the same in every single EVP that you get of it, it's just crazy.
Right. This is, I mean, it sounds like somebody has like a big ring, one of those old fashioned big rings full of keys. And since this was also at Antiques,
Absolutely.
I believe.
Yeah.
And this is where we usually always get those. And so being that it was a jail, it's kind of the same thing. And that's what it is. I'm referring to this as key jingle. It's not a voice, it's a sound. But it's a sound that we recorded when no one was around with a set of keys making a sound like that, and I get it fairly frequently. So this is the keys jingling. So pretty cool.
I think like the big thing that people don't understand with EVPs, it's not always a voice. I have heard big band music playing very clearly but very quietly. In EVPs, I've heard piano, like just notes, not like a song, but like someone hitting a piano key. There's no pianos in Antiques and Uniques,
Right?
Like, and that's where I've heard like the piano. I've heard it's basically you pay attention to music, especially if you hear it over a long sweep. With like the ghost box or anything like that, because if it goes continually over a long sweep, it's not staying on the same channel. So there's no way it could possibly make a melodic tune perfectly.
Over all those frequencies like that. And that it also brings in, that's another good point, that like when you're hearing things like this, it's a perfect example of a residual haunt, because it is a sound. It's a thing that's just playing itself on a loop. Like in our house, we hear throughout the day, throughout the night, it sounds like our kitchen cabinet doors being open and closed. On our recordings, we hear it. We'll be sitting here watching TV in the living room. And
it's every night.
Yeah. I mean, this goes on throughout the day and throughout the night. So.
Yeah, it's morning, noon, and night. It's a constant
and
opening, shutting, and the whistling.
Yep.
Which my grandfather whistled all the time. All the time.
And like, I remember... Yeah, at first, when I really first started noticing things in here, when I first moved in here, was the walking up and down of the hallway. Early in the morning, it was almost the same time every morning, and it sounded like somebody was walking down the hallway and going to one of the back bedrooms and opening or closing one of those bedroom doors. And it happened several times a week, and it was always at the same time of morning. Like somebody was going back to that bedroom. So EVPs are not always voices. They can be sounds, too. So what's the next one?
Our next one is, so Eric hears kiss, and I hear kiss me after it, but there's also another overlay on top of that of something else trying to talk over the word me. So that's my take on it. It is definitely the word kiss.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's a little open for interpretation. The very first word is very obvious as saying kiss. When I hear it, it sounds like it's saying kiss me on the mouth or something along those lines. This is actually not just a plain EVP, but this one was actually recorded while I was using the EchoVox 3.0 system on my cell phone while I was recording at a location. So you'll hear it undoubtedly say kiss, and then I'll leave it up to you to kind of see what you hear from the last part, because it's kind of choppy and fast, and it almost sounds like it could be reversed, but it's not. So this is the kiss recording.
Kiss. Kiss.
So what's the next one?
Next one is the one that everybody and their mom gets. Leave.
Oh, yes. This is also one from EchoVox 3.0. And you'll notice the reverb that's on it. And within that system, you can actually custom set how much or how little reverb you want. You can save them as presets. You can even share the presets with other EchoVox users if you find a preset of how the echo sounds that you like. Keep in mind, when I'm recording these, I'm using, more often than not, I'm using my cell phone with an external speaker hard plugged into the cell phone, not using Bluetooth. And it's also able to pick up your own voice through the phone and apply those reverb effects to it. It does have its own built-in recording system to record the sound onto your phone that you can later transfer to your computer, or you can even play right back through the program itself. But personally, I always use an external speaker and a digital recorder set up near the speaker to record it, and then I can come back and download it on my computer and listen to it later on. So this is one that's frequent and lots of different places, believe it or not. You'll randomly get EVPs or recordings of spirits asking for help, and also it's pretty frequent to get recordings of spirits telling you to leave or get out. And this one is very commanding. It's very obvious, and it says leave.
Leave. Leave.
So what's the next one?
Our next one is, it's your favorite one.
Okay.
For whatever reason. It's missing the tour.
Yeah, I don't know why I like this one so much. This is it's a little boy's voice, and it was when I was doing one of my walking tours, and this one once again is back in Antiques and Uniques in St. Augustine, Florida. And at the time that I was recording this, there were no kids on my tour. There were no kids standing outside the shop to where you could like maybe hear somebody on the street. And it is a little boy's voice saying, "I keep missing the tour."
Missing the tour. Missing the tour.
So go figure. I think it's funny because it happened to be recorded while I was doing one of my paranormal tours.
I think he just really likes his tour.
Well, you know.
And
I
think that you're super psyched that somebody's upset for missing it.
Yeah, I mean, even the span. When I play that for people on the tour, giving them some examples of some of the EVPs we get in that particular place, that opens a whole new can of worms of them. No, you're here all the time. We're
It gets
crazy.
people talking. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
The next one this is one that, you know, if you're listening and if you want to respond and tell us what you think it says, we would love your help, because Eric and I hear two different things. He hears something dead, like the word dead after a bunch of words, and I hear clear as day. So we'll let you guys kind of give us your input on what you hear.
Yeah, and I've asked other people when I let them listen to this on my walking tour also, and it's a bit of disagreement. It is a Class A EVP.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just the way it comes out, though, it's hard for me to interpret it, because at first I honestly thought it was a female's voice saying, "Here is death," and then after hearing it several times, now to me it sounds like it's saying Peter is dead. And what do you think it sounds?
Clear as day.
Clear as day. So,
which it is not.
Yeah. I mean, it's very obvious that it's words, but it's kind of like, you know, when somebody's talking to you and you're like, "What'd you just say?" It has that effect on me,
yeah,
because it's like they're words, they're obvious, they're clear, but I'm not understanding it completely. And it's the whole frequency response thing. I'm hearing one set of frequencies and somebody else is hearing another set. So I'm going to let you listen to it, and you can decide what you think it is. And then you can, post your response about it on Westgate Paranormal's Facebook page for this podcast when we share it, or you can even email me, you know, whether it's through Spreaker or whatever. If you're listening to this on like Google Play or iTunes or something like that, then all I can say is just head on over to Westgate Paranormal on Facebook and, find this post and post your response there. So here it is.
Here is dead. Here is dead. Here is dead.
And what's the next one?
Our next one is What We Do.
Right, and I don't know what this refers to either. This is one of those random sort of things, I believe.
This one's kind of creepy.
Yeah,
this one kind of unnerves me a little bit for
it is
some
kind of
reason.
creepy. And it's, once again, it's one of those random sort of things interjecting itself on an EVP session.
Because it's kind of like, it's what we do.
Yeah, and
it's just like, okay,
what
well,
is it?
what were you just talking about?
Right. And, obviously a lot of these are kind of taken out of context because I record for, sometimes 20 minutes and then go back and review what it is. And so you're not hearing all the questions asked with it and stuff. But this one's, it's what it says. It's like, it's what we do.
What we do. What we do.
Okay.
Okay, and then we've got who's talking.
This is an interesting one to me. This one is actually kind of fast. It's a little quiet. Like it's a female voice, and it's soft spoken, but it sounds like, a young female. I would say, mid-20s at the very latest.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing the EVP session, this response comes back asking us a question in response to our question, and she's basically just saying, "Who's talking?"
Who's talking? Who's talking? Who's talking?
So those are some of the really high quality Class A's that I usually share on my tours with some of the place. So it gives you an idea of what you're hearing with an actual EVP just by itself, the recorded voices, and you're also getting an idea of what you can expect if you use something like EchoVox. I didn't include any of the sound clips from like using the Spirit Box, just because usually when we're using the Spirit Box and something like that, more often than not, we're kind of walking around with it. Sometimes I do sit it down and let it do its thing in one spot near the recorder, but oftentimes it's just I hand it to somebody, say on my tour or an investigation or something like that, and you're walking around with it trying to figure out the best area to get communication from.
And I don't think people realize, like, when you watch people use the Spirit Box on TV, you kind of get an idea, like you might kind of understand that it's loud. I want you guys to understand that thing will pierce your eardrums.
Oh yeah.
When you turn it on.
The speaker that's built into it is crap. You cannot hear anything worthwhile on it. You have to plug in an external speaker. And the speaker that I carry around with me more often than not, it's a JBL Clip 2. And so it's a Bluetooth speaker, but it has a built-in plug-in. And I use it with a built-in plug-in and not Bluetooth because that just adds one more part that could be possibly interfered with, I guess you could say, since it's a Bluetooth transmission. So I keep it hardwired. And that thing is so loud when you plug in an external speaker that's a good quality speaker. I'll tell you that right now. And so if you've ever seen the BuzzFeed Unsolved Supernatural and Shane Madej is like, oh my God. With
Not
the
this
box
thing
again.
again.
Yeah.
That I feel your pain so much, Shane, on that one. But I feel like I'm a lot like Ryan because I want to use it all the time, because if you can get it working right and you can ignore how loud that sound is, you can really get some good stuff out of it.
Can. And you can always, if you want to go through and do what I do with it and kind of the route of putting it through like a guitar pedal that cancels out the noise, you can get rid of that static altogether so you're only hearing the voices. But that requires you to, go that one extra step and plug it into something that will cancel it in real time that way.
Totally
So
worth it.
it is, in my opinion. But it is also something because of the fact that scanning so fast and you're getting those fragments that you're like, what did I just hear? So it is always a good idea to record it while you're doing it.
Always record.
Yeah. And that's, in my opinion, that's with anything. You should always have an audio recorder going when you're doing an investigation.
Even if you're not doing anything, especially when you're not doing anything, because a lot of times that's when you get things, is you guys just sitting around in a room BSing, and they start responding to you.
Yeah, it's like when we were in Moon River and even Forsyth Park Inn, as we walked around from location to location within the building to investigate, I kept my recorder running because oftentimes it's when you're not paying attention, you're getting something. I would even I've always, even when I'm walking around from place to place, I'll aim the camera just randomly behind me and take a picture because I've gotten stuff that way.
Yeah.
Because you're not like set up aiming at something, you're just like randomly snapping a photo behind you and you're like, oh, something's following me. You know what I mean? So always use a recorder. In my opinion, that is your first and most important piece in an investigation, is an audio recording device of some sort. Your phone, a digital recorder, if you want to go full on and have studio recording equipment that you have set up, great. Just as long as you can record, because you're going to get so much more than just going in and snapping a few photos or carrying around an EMF meter or something. It's that important, in my opinion. EVP is that important in an investigation.
I think the fun thing about it is literally anybody can do it. Anybody listening can, finish up this podcast and go sit in a room and record on your phone and ask questions, and you could get something in your own home.
Exactly.
That's what is so great. It is literally something anyone can do, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. Granted, you can spend a ton of money, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't even have to leave your own house. If you think something's going on in your house, start recording.
Yeah.
If you're already in the home and nothing has happened to you personally, it's just weird in your house, record.
And it may, honestly, in some my sort of opinion, in some places too, contact with these different spirits in different places is sort of transdimensional. So you can sometimes go to a place, do an investigation, or even just go and do a recording, take some pictures. You've at that point made a connection with those spirits. So there's not really, in a lot of instances, there's not really a whole lot of time-space barriers. It's sort of like the idea of a spirit guide. You can be anywhere and talk to a spirit that you have discovered to be a guide of some sort and have them come through anywhere in the world.
See, I kind of equate it to like a video game. Like when you go to a new location, you opened up a new safety zone.
Right. So you can always have connection to that.
Right. Yeah. I equate it to a video game.
And it's not, I can't say it, I'm not going to say it's always like that.
No.
But there are certain spirits that it seems like you can make communication with on location, and then for some reason later on be somewhere completely different, and those same spirits will come through. It's kind of like using a Ouija board.
Yeah.
And that brings up a whole lot of other things that I'm not going to go into.
Which we will totally cover another time.
Yeah, but just the idea of like, well, if you're making that kind of communication, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
So, and just to touch one last thing, ITC in the field of using it with EVPs is not just limited to audio recordings. ITC can also be what we call feedback loops with video. There are a lot of people who are now, it seems more than ever, experimenting with video ITC, where you can take a monitor of some sort, say an old TV.
Which White Noise, the movie, covers that as well.
Yeah, and if you plug in a camera to monitor through that TV, you can point the camera at that TV and find the sweet spot where it creates a feedback loop, and you can actually get images of the spirits along with the voices that you're trying to get. Some people even do what they call water ITC, where they will take a bowl of water, and this is an ancient form of it.
It's like a scrying bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. But you're using it with pictures, and it's illuminated usually outdoors or directly overhead, and then you aim the camera at an angle to the surface of the water, and you stir the water, and you'll start taking pictures of actual spirit faces and stuff. So it all plays in a whole lot of different ways. I know it's getting more in detail than we kind of planned, but yeah. I'm just showing you ITC.
That's all right.
That's instrumental, meaning you're using a device is what that means. So, Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that we pretty much covered everything. I feel like I have a lot of work ahead of me for the next episode because I did 3 hours worth of work on this, and I think I'm now intimidated by my own self.
We do plan on here in the coming days just working on some more spontaneous, I guess you can say, ones, possibly doing some live ones so that we can interact with you through Spreaker, which is the host that I use for these podcasts. And also I'm planning on some interviews with some of these people that we mentioned, especially with Danny Roberge, once I can do that and he okays, or once he's been interviewed 1 million times, but I cannot stress or push enough to at least try his apps with Big Beard Studios on Google Play, the Echo Vox systems. There's different iterations that he has, the classic, which is 2.0, the newest model itself is the 3.0. He's just now also testing out Echovox Touch, so that's going to be out here soon, and that actually relies on you touching the screen, sort of like his previous one with Whisperbox, where you actually are moving your finger around on the screen to get those sound banks working and activated, so you're hands-on with it. So I cannot stress that enough. At least go check it out on YouTube. If you are really serious about doing investigations, getting EVPs, and you want to step it up just a little beyond just a recorder, then in my opinion, that's the best way to go. I apologize if you hear our cat meowing in the background. She's just getting pissy.
She's hungry.
She does. What else? Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook. Our page is Westgate Paranormal. So you can just go facebook.com/Westgate Paranormal. And that's where we're going to be sharing our podcasts and everything as well, through as well. Also, it's going to be on Google Play, it's going to be on iTunes, it's going to be on all those things. So you can find us anywhere through there. And you can also download the Spreaker Podcast Radio app, which is a free download, and listen to our podcast through there. We have just started a Patreon account too, so I'm still kind of getting that squared away, where as we do some more of these reveals, I guess you can say, of some of the evidence with EVPs, with some of our investigations, and specifically some more private interviews with developers and researchers, that will make some of those things available to patrons only through Patreon. But if you want to check that out as well, I've shared it on our Facebook page for Westgate Paranormal. So I think that about covers everything. We've gone almost an hour and a half with it. So.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. But these things can go on forever. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Please, if you don't follow us on Spreaker already, go ahead and follow us. If you want, share this. You can download these podcasts through many different formats if you want to listen to them offline. This has been pre-recorded, so that's why I mentioned the date in the beginning. And any feedback, any questions, feel free to do it through our Facebook page. And next time we come through, we'll try to answer them as best we can when we're not doing a live show.
Come talk to us. We're bored.
Yeah.
We like talking to people. I like talking to people.
The more connections we can make with all this, the more it's actually just going to help the field, and the more people we can get interested in it and interview and get stories and things like that too. That's something we're looking at.
Yeah, super excited.
So thank you all very much, and we will talk to you next time. Just keep a lookout for what our next podcast is going to be. We usually announce it, a day or two, a few days ahead of time. We've been trying to get it to where we can kind of do it once a week with these pre-recorded podcasts, so we'll just see how it plays out. So until then, from Westgate Paranormal Research in Florida, thank you very much.
Bye.